Guys, I think most of you know that I'm a watercolor artist, and as a watercolor artist, I have filled and tested a lot of watercolor sketchbooks in my pursuit of an affordable, accessible sketchbook that is capable of handling my needs. So I wanted to take a moment today to show you guys some of the sketchbooks I have filled or used and explain the pros and cons of each. We're going to go ahead and start with the Strathmore visual journals. So far, the ones that I own are available in 3 flavors: watercolor 140 pound, although there is a 90 pound available, Bristol vellum, and Bristol smooth. I use Bristol vellum and Bristol smooth not for watercolors but for Copic markers, and I don't mind doing a quick flip through. I may have cut some of the better pieces out. This is the smooth, and I haven't worked in it as much as I would like, I think because this is a new one, but I did do some ink tests. And I did do a Copic marker piece. And I was testing out the gold alcohol inks by, I believe, Pinata. And then I have actually this really cute piece that I would like to work on at some point. And that's that in there. Oh, sorry about that. Here's the Bristol vellum. It has a little bit more tooth to it, and this is mostly used. There's some alcohol marker tests in there, but it's mostly used for swatching, some pit pin tests. This was a challenge piece. This was messing around with crayons in here, so it has some texture to it, so it can be used for sort of a mixed media approach. It doesn't have to be watercolor, and it doesn't have to just be marker. I have loads of alcohol ink stuff in here, but also, you know, some pen and ink work, some fountain pen stuff. And this is actually full. I don't necessarily recommend the Strathmore visual journal with watercolor because it takes a lot of getting used to, because it can't take a whole lot of layers of color before the color starts sloughing off. But I sort of used a variety of media in this. And Strathmore also makes a field journal, which is about the same quality. It's a little bit larger in a different format. And I use that pretty regularly as well for pen and ink work. This is almost all watercolor though, so you can only do a few layers because it's not particularly high quality paper, and it is cellulose based paper, which is great for studies and is great if you sort of know that you're dealing with a lower quality paper that isn't going to perform as well. But it's frustrating if you're trying to do like watercolor, nicer watercolor stories or more layered story sketches or more layered pieces. This is a really early Arts Next versus Sketchbox. This is the Sketchbox one. These are the cute little emoticon illustrations I did for a sticker pack. I filled up my Strathmore watercolor. I moved on to the Be Creative watercolor paper. It has this nice vellum sheet of paper, so you can start working on the first page if you so wish. The paper is actually very frustrating to use because it absorbs your water immediately, so you really can't move your paint around a whole lot. Here's some more of those emoticons, as well as some doodles. So I don't really use this notebook for too much. When I finished doing the emoticons, I basically was finished with it. So I wouldn't recommend this over the Strathmore visual journal. Next up are 2 outliers. I have a Stillman and Burn, I believe it is a beta, and I haven't actually done any real water testing. I've just done like some noodling around with a Wink pen, which is a glass pen, sort of like a fountain pen, but not really. I've played around with Kuretake Zig, clean color real brush markers, and water. So I have done some water media studies. These are Sakura Koi, also Sakura Koi, and see, I haven't really used this one a whole lot. This is a Canson Montval watercolor sketchbook, and Montval is what I use for Cara pages, so I'm actually really familiar with it, and I need to go ahead and paint that. But I have some watercolor doodles in here. A lot of ink doodles. I like to use watercolor notebooks for sort of mixed media sketches, mixed media approaches. Here's a water test for the Diamine shimmering inks. So that's Brandy Dazzle and that's Shimmering Seas. some more ink tests, still more ink tests, messing around still with fountain pen inks and water media. And then there's, this is the Artist Loft watercolor test that I did. So as this is a study of some mushrooms using the same cheap watercolors. So for an inexpensive and accessible watercolor sketchbook, I do recommend the Canson Montval watercolor sketchbook. Talking again about mixed media, I use the inexpensive Strathmore mixed media books for my alcohol marker swatching and my alcohol marker field tests. It's got sort of a plate finish. It's a little more textured than plate, but less textured than vellum. These are pretty inexpensive. You can get these down at Michael's. They handle alcohol marker fairly well and just kind of make for good mixed media sketchbooks. I haven't done too much with water in these for really no particular reason other than, you know, I don't want the pages to buckle, and I have all my all my marker studies in these sort of books. So it's a good way to get artist quality paper that's not going to degrade for a low price point. Last mixed media sketchbook before I move back into watercolor. So I kind of handle watercolor sketchbooks and mixed media sketchbooks in the same way because I'll use watercolor sketchbooks for mixed media. Is the Canson XL mixed media, which I think is comparable to the Strathmore yellow cover. And this has kind of just a lot of junk in it. Stuff from the Affordable Art Supply series. So a lot of blending tests for inexpensive color pencils, swatches for Crayola, swatches from Art Snacks vs. Sketchbox. So this is sort of like a good, inexpensive, easy to keep on hand sketchbook for testing out art supplies, and it's not going to break the bank, but it's not really high quality paper either. But isn't that really what we're looking for in sketchbooks? So a lot of doodles. These are some gesture studies using a folded pen. So the paper can kind of take a lot of abuse without buckling too bad, and you can get this out Walmart. These are really easy to get a hold of. Finally, ending on watercolor sketchbooks once more, we're going to talk about Handbooks and the Maruman watercolor sketchbooks. And you can get these watercolor sketchbooks at Jerry's Artorama. I have several of them. I use them when I go on trips. So these are really good, in my opinion, with my little travel watercolor kit for field studies. The paper is really more like heavier cardstock. So if you're used to the Ranger watercolor cardstock, the paper is very similar. And they're fairly inexpensive, maybe a little bit harder to find if you don't have a Jerry's. So I have like one for each trip that I take, or one for each. So this is my Louisiana one, and this is just one for trips. And then I also have a few handbooks, but this is the handbook that has the most filled out in it, and this is really comparable to Moleskine. I'm not a big fan of Moleskine, so I really like these. These are inexpensive. They have a linen cover, which feels a lot nicer than the pleather cover. They have an elastic band. They have a band to mark your spot, and they also have like a long pocket in the back for tickets and such. And these are good, I think, for like sort of landscapes or weird views. Or doing food spreads. I was kind of obsessed with doing Louisiana food spreads for a while, since that is my native home, and I'm trying to put together a book about Louisiana at some point. So I sort of did all the native foods and all the foods that are grown there. So this paper is actually really nice for inexpensive watercolor paper. You can get some really nice effects on it, and it doesn't dry too quick and it doesn't dry too slow. So that was a quick overview of a majority of the watercolor sketchbooks and mixed media sketchbooks that I have worked with in the past. I really recommend the handbooks. These are great. I also really like the Hokusai books. You can use fountain pen in these, and it's not going to tear up the paper. So if you like using fountain pens with your art, these are great, and you can get them through Jerry's Artorama. I also recommend the Canson XL and the Strathmore Mixed Media if you're looking for inexpensive mixed media books, as well as the Canson Mont Vol if you're looking for a decent watercolor sketchbook and you don't want to have to make your own. The verdict is still out on the Stillman and Burn, but I do have to say for a mixed media book, it is not my favorite. So I hope you guys found that helpful. I hope you found it useful. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'm sure you've got your own favorite sketchbooks for mixed media projects, so let me know that as well. And if it's something I've never tried, I'll definitely try to give it a shot. I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope to see you again really soon. Bye!